Timing your personal injury case. If you're curious about how long each stage of your injury case is going to take, this is the video for you. I'm Joel, this is Chase. Welcome back to the Williams, Elleby, Howard, and Easter YouTube channel. That's what we're talking about today, is how long do things take when you're pursuing an injury case? And the way we look at it is there are several distinct stages of the case.
That's right.
So we're just going to take them in chronological order and go through about what time or how much time each stage takes, which will tell you how much time the entire process could take. So Chase, what about the pre-suit stage?
The pre-suit stage is, I'd say, not really the longest, but you can kind of divvy it up between pre-suit and suit stage. But for the pre-suit stage, the question always gets asked is, client comes in, they're in a wreck, they want to know kind of what the timing is going to be, and it really all just depends. But the things we look at are, number one, how long are you going to treat, right? That is probably the number one driver as to how long it's going to take for a case to last, right? How long are you going to treat? There's a lot of investigating stuff that goes on the front end. That doesn't take too long, month, 2 months, depending on the severity of the case. But it typically depends on how long that person's going to treat. And I always tell my clients too, in Georgia specifically, for any car wreck case or any personal injury case, you generally have 2 years from the date of the incident to file the lawsuit. And you can treat all the way up to 2 years. You can treat for 2 months. You can treat for past 2 years. So that's really going to be sort of the number one driver of the how long, other timing and how long it's going to be to pursue a case.
Yeah, and most of the time, especially in moderate and almost always in severe injury cases, the investigative stage, the part that we're involved in, getting open records, going to the scene, any accident reconstruction that needs to happen, all of that stuff is usually done well in advance of when our client is done treating.
Right.
And so that's why Chase, I think, is saying it depends on how long the client or you are going to treat, because if you treat for 3 months, then the pre-suit stage may last 3.5 months or 4 months, depending on how long it takes to get your medical records and bills in after you're done treating, and then your attorney is going to need, a week or two at least to put a demand package together to send to the insurance company. So At that point, once the demand is sent, then the insurance company is going to have a certain amount of time, and it's going to vary from state to state. In Georgia, it's going to be at least 30 days to agree to pay a certain amount. And they may pay the demand, they may offer a lesser amount, but you're going to have some time built in there. But then you kind of move into, let's say the case does not settle after the demand is sent. If the case settles after the demand is sent, then it's going to be a pretty quick claim, right? Just a few months. But then if you have to enter into litigation, it's a whole other ballgame.
That's right, because then you got to prepare the lawsuit, you got to file the lawsuit, you got to get the person served. Sometimes, depending on who it is you're trying to serve, if it's an individual who's gone rogue, it's going to take, a month, 2 months to track them down. If it's a company, a corporation, it's usually pretty quick. But yeah, you've got to get the lawsuit, get the discovery filed, and then you start the discovery phase, right? And in Georgia, typically the discovery phase is 6 months. Almost usually always gets extended, but that's the time when you're answering questions, exchanging documents, tracking down and deposing witnesses, talking to doctors, kind of doing all that evidence stuff that we've talked about in other videos, and that usually can take a while. So then once you get through the discovery phase, we're hit with the motions phases, right? Yeah.
And one other thing on after you file the lawsuit, sometimes, especially in trucking cases or tractor trailer cases, the individual defendant is likely to be traveling all over the place, right? So sometimes it takes longer to find them and figure out where they're at. Because if it's a long haul trucker and they're going from Georgia to Minnesota to California and everywhere in between, then obviously you have to give them the document to serve them, so it's going to take longer. But I'd say, once the lawsuit's filed until the end of discovery, at a minimum in most places it's going to take at least 8 months, because you're going to file it, you got to serve the defendant, they got to have a certain amount of time to answer, then you've got the discovery phase, right? But once that's over, a lot of times the at-fault party or the defendant is going to file motions, sometimes called motions for summary judgment, things like that. And then you have to brief or write written responses to those motions to try to keep your case from getting thrown out. And that really depends on how long the judge takes to rule on those motions. So usually once the motion's filed, if you're in state court in Georgia, you're going to have 30 days to respond. If you're in federal court, it's going to be a shorter amount of time. But then the judge is either going to rule based on the written briefs, or the judge will set it for an oral hearing where you'll go and have arguments in front of the judge on that motion, and sometimes the judge will set it for a hearing within 2 or 3 months. Sometimes it'll take longer. Assuming that the case is not thrown out at that point, a lot of times you go to mediation, and that takes time to get scheduled. And mediation is just a formal settlement conference where you'll bring in a retired judge, an older lawyer, somebody who's not litigating cases on a daily basis to try to help broker a resolution. Assuming that the case does not settle at mediation, what happens next?
Yeah, well, next would be trial for sure. And before I jump into trial, I want to circle back to motions, because motions happen in a lot of cases. They don't happen in all cases. I would say kind of your run-of-the-mill standard car wreck case, you're not going to get bogged down in too many motions unless there's some sort of novel issue. Typically in those types of cases, you just got to get to the discovery, then you can get to trial. You're going to get a lot of motions in premises cases, medical malpractice cases, cases where you're dealing a lot with experts. You're going to see a lot of motions there, and there's going to be a lot of time tied up and just kind of getting things squared away to get to trial. And then trial can last, well, it depends. Let's back up. So trial, one, you got to get on the trial calendar. So depending on the county you're in, you could have trial judges that move cases pretty quickly, or you could have trial judges that hear a civil case every 6 months. So once you get on the trial calendar, that's the first step. And then hopefully you're pretty high up on the trial calendar, so when it's actually time, for the judge to start calling trials, that you actually get called in that week or the 2-week window that they have to try the cases. So it really just depends on the county you're in as to whether or not you're going to go to trial pretty quickly once the discovery phase, the motions and the mediation, all that's over. So let's just assume you get lucky, you get there quick, you're on the trial calendar, the judge calls you in. Well, then it's going to really depend on how many witnesses you have in your case, how quickly you can get through voir dire, through all the witness and evidence, to how long that trial is going to be. Your kind of standard car wreck case could be anywhere between I'd say 2 at a minimum, 3 to 4 days max. You can have other more advanced or sophisticated cases that are going to last a week, 2 weeks. It really just depends. And throughout that trial, you're not only just presenting your case to the jury, but you're also going over a lot of stuff outside of the jury, such as motions in limine, any directed verdicts, a bunch of other stuff goes on. There's like trials within trials, so it can be very time consuming and can take a long time.
Yep. So once the trial's over, depending on how it goes, there may or may not be an appeal. Then you're talking about significantly more time if there's an appeal. So in Georgia, once the transcript of the trial is done, the judge rules on any post-trial motions, then it's usually, in most personal injury cases, going to go to the Court of Appeals first. They have to issue a ruling within what they call 2 terms or 8 months of the case being docketed in that court. They're going to rule however they're going to rule, and then you can apply for what we call certiorari, or ask the Georgia Supreme Court to exercise its discretion and hear the case. If the Georgia Supreme Court hears the case, then you've got even more time.
Tack on more time.
So long story short, if you're fortunate, then the insurance company will make a reasonable offer and you can get your case settled within a few months. If you're extremely unfortunate, then you're going to have to go through the pre-suit stage, which could last anywhere from a few months up to, like Chase said, 2 years. Then the lawsuit's going to be filed, which is going to add at least another 12 months onto it. Then there may be motions, then there may be mediations. At this point, if everything is taking the max amount of time, you may be 3 years into it. And then you're going to have the trial, then you're going to have appeals, which could make 4 or 5 years. So if you're extremely unlucky, then it could take 4 or 5 years to get it done. Most cases do not take that long. The case could settle at any time, at any point during this entire process that we've been talking about. Sometimes it'll settle in the middle of discovery.
That's right.
If a witness pops up that changes the landscape of the case, if a document pops up that changes the landscape of the case, if the court rules a certain way, things may change. Parties may reassess their risk. But in long story short, there is a lot of time that goes into preparing for a trial and appeals. Even though the trial may last 1 week, there's a whole lot more time that goes into getting ready for it. There's a whole lot more time that goes into trying to gather all the documents, gather all the witness testimony, those type things, to put the case in the best position for a resolution that's favorable to our clients. So if you came here looking for a definitive answer that it takes 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 2 years, you're not going to find it
Right.
because every case is different. Some of our cases last a month, some of our cases last 5 years. It just depends on what's going on.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Is just kind of, it really does just depend. That's like the classic lawyer answer is like, how long is it going to take? And it really really does just depend. Like it can be anywhere, like Joel said, between 1, 2 months, 3 months, relatively quick to all the way. I mean, there's cases that can last up to 10 years because we didn't even talk about how you can be 5 years into a case, you can dismiss it and refile and start all over again. So yeah, it can very well take a long time, but also be very quick. So.
Yeah, or you go up to the Supreme Court and they reverse it, and then you have to start all over. So
that's right. Yep.
Anyway, don't be discouraged by the amount of time it takes. Chances are that if you have a personal injury case, it's not going to take 5 or 10 years, but you also have to just keep that little nugget in the back of your mind that it might, if you are unfortunate with the way that the procedure goes. But that's kind of the long and short of it. Maybe a month, maybe a year, maybe 10 years. It just depends. So, well, we hope this video has been helpful to you. If so, give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, we will see you next week. As personal injury lawyers, we love what we do, and we're happy to share the experience we've gained in personal injury law. To help our family, friends, and YouTube subscribers, we've shared over 300 personal injury videos covering various injury topics. So if you'd like to gain more knowledge that may help protect yourself or a loved one when they're on the roads or out in public, check out our channel or view our playlist of shorts for quick personal injury tips.